Well, was the Force with these documentaries or not so much? Hey everybody, Ryan Reed here. Today we're talking about, well, the Star Wars sequels in a way. We're actually going to be talking about the two documentaries that came out about The Last Jedi, entitled The Director and the Jedi. We're going to be talking about the documentary about Rise of Skywalker, entitled The Skywalker Legacy. Now, the reason I decided to do this was because I was thinking about Star Wars the other day, and I was looking back at my impromptu reviews and realized I actually didn't do a impromptu review on the Rise of Skywalker, which is interesting. I think it's because I saw it a couple weeks after everybody had already been talking about it, so I just didn't feel like a review was completely necessary. But I will say this, that the sequel films, the Star Wars sequel films are interesting to say the least. I am a big Star Wars fan. Now, I'm not like a mega fan. I don't have like props from the movies, or I'm not like going on Star Wars message boards or anything like that. Instead, I'm just someone who grew up with the films on VHS before they altered everything and changed everything. I had the original versions of the movie, grew up with those, saw a couple of the special edition versions in the theater, saw the prequels in the theater. I had, action figures from when they started redoing the action figures in the 90s. And I do have my own opinions about, the changes George Lucas made, which, spoiler alert, I don't like. I don't think there's really a lot of people that do, but, and the sequel films are interesting to me. Now, before I get started with this video, I'm mainly going to be talking about the documentaries, but two things about that. One, I am going to have to go into some spoilers about some of the aspects of the films, so if you haven't seen any of the sequel films, Episode 7, Episode 8, or Episode 9, come back after you've seen those. And the other thing is that, here's the thing. Whenever you talk about Star Wars now, people get very opinionated. people have their own ideas of what Star Wars should be and shouldn't be, and it's no longer a thing that, like, I grew up, which is like, you just watched the movies and you liked them or you didn't. If you liked Star Wars, great. If you didn't like Star Wars, great. And now it's like this big thing where people get angry if you don't like something or if you do like something. And you know what? Here's the way I look at it. If you like something, great. If you don't, that's fine too. I think having a discussion is fantastic, but getting angry over someone else's opinion is kind of ridiculous, because even though these are very meaningful movies to people, ultimately they are just movies. They may have a special, place in your heart for you. They may mean something to you, and that's awesome. That's great that you enjoy them. But also at the same time, you shouldn't, be angry at people or belittle people because they like something different. I mean, I've met people who like the prequel films more than the originals, which is baffling to me, but I still, I can still have a discussion with them and talk about why that is. So, all that to say, this is just my opinion. If you have a different opinion, that's okay. But I'm just here to kind of talk about these documentaries because I think it's interesting. Now, these documentaries are the whole reason I decided to watch these was a while ago, back in after Rise of Skywalker came out, I think March, I saw some news articles that were like, the Skywalker Legacy, new documentary on the Blu-ray, is incredibly important. You have to watch this, blah, blah, blah. And being someone who came out of Rise of Skywalker very, very, very disappointed, I was interested to see what this documentary had in store. I was also interested in watching the Last Jedi documentary called The Director and the Jedi, because for that movie, people were very split down the middle. Some people loved the changes. I happen to be one of those people. Some people didn't like it. Personally, my opinion of Last Jedi, I actually think it's a really solid film. It's not a perfect film. It is flawed, and I think there are some plot points that obviously go nowhere. But in terms of the big thing that, the big aspects that people didn't like, the way that Luke was, Rey's, lineage, all that stuff in The Last Jedi, not the saga or the sequel trilogy as a whole, but just The Last Jedi, I like those changes because I felt like this was the first time they'd done something completely new with Star Wars, especially after Force Awakens, which is a film I really, really enjoy, but I think anybody at this point can look at that film and go, yeah, it's kind of just a reboot of A New Hope, which is totally fine. I still really like Force Awakens, but Last Jedi I felt like took a very different approach to things, and so I personally enjoyed those aspects of it, but I know some people did not. But I actually think, I'm not going to talk too much about the movies as a whole, because I think it'd be fascinating. I actually plan on doing this as a video, I think, at some point, but it's probably going to be quite a ways away. But I think it would be fascinating to take a look at the Star Wars saga as a whole and watch it from start to end and see now do all the pieces connect. So maybe keep an eye out for that. That might be a couple months down the road, but at some point I might do that video. But that being said, I was looking at Disney Plus the other day and found out that in their extras section for each movie, they have all the extras that are on the Blu-ray. So you get all the documentaries, you get the deleted scenes, you get all the special effects making of stuff. So it's really cool. You can take a look at it if you don't happen to own them and you do have Disney Plus. So that's how I watched these. And I want to say that both of these documentaries, well, great documentaries to look at, are not exactly what I was kind of hoping to see out of these documentaries. If you look at like the special features on Phantom Menace and you watch some of that behind the scenes stuff, you watch as George Lucas makes decisions that influence the movie that we got, but you can also see him question them and decide, was this the right choice? And I think that is fascinating to watch, because whatever you think of George Lucas at this point, it is fascinating for someone like myself who's interested in seeing filmmaking, watching somebody who's, you know, been told that they're amazing their entire life as like a filmmaker and stuff, watch them kind of question their decisions. Is this right? And see that if somebody had just maybe gone, George, maybe we don't do that idea, or maybe we pull away from this, instead of having a bunch of people like, yeah, George, yeah, that's great, maybe the prequels would have played out differently. And so that's fascinating. I like that the film, the behind the scenes stuff for Phantom Menace, shows you the entire process, flaws and all. And that's something that, even though I don't really like the prequels, I can appreciate and watch to see not only all the effort, of course, that goes into the films, but also watching, you know, mistakes be made, and people own that. I even think there's a moment after a screening, and I'm paraphrasing, but George Lucas says something like, I may have gone too far with this one. He's talking about, you know, Phantom Menace and how everything plays out. And you know what? George, for as much crazy stuff as you've done in the movies and how much you've changed them, unfortunately, I can appreciate that you even had that moment to be like, maybe this was the wrong move. But it was too late and the movie came out and everything. And that is fascinating to watch. We get a little bit of that in The Director and the Jedi. We get some moments where we see Rian Johnson, you know, watching after he's watched some dailies and stuff and go, you know, I gotta rework this and change that because this isn't working. Or you see some of that conflict between him and Mark Hamill. It's no surprise that in this movie, in The Last Jedi, Mark Hamill really disagreed with Rian Johnson's approach to Luke, and that he was very much of the mindset that Luke should always be a symbol of hope, and seeing Luke kind of be more of a hermit, you know, turning away from the Force and just kind of looking at the Jedi and saying, I'm done with that, you know, after the mistake he made with trying to kill Kylo Ren. And to me, again, personal take, I find what Rian Johnson did more fascinating because it gives us a flawed hero. Yes, Luke has been the hero of the, you know, the original trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6, and we get to see him grow through those. But you got to remember, Luke started out as kind of like a whiny kid who's just like, nah, I want to go get, you know, power converters. Like that was Luke. And we saw him grow to become a Jedi Master. And Last Jedi, to me, just makes sense. If we're filling in the blanks of what's happened, Luke has gone from being a Jedi Master and training Jedis to seeing something as terrifying as the power that he saw in Emperor Palpatine or in Darth Vader, and reacting poorly to that. And the choice he made makes him question himself and go, you know, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And that is fascinating. But Mark Hamill disagreed with it. And you see moments of that. You see Mark Hamill just kind of hanging out on set and dealing with that. You know, obviously this is a documentary. They're presenting it a certain way. But it seems like Mark Hamill was kind of dealing with that idea that, you know, this isn't his trilogy anymore. He's Luke, yes, but it's not Star Wars, the original. It's these new characters' story. And he plays a part in that. And it's him kind of dealing with that. And so on that end, this documentary is great. And you can see Rian Johnson talk about a lot of the choices he made and justify them and everything like that. And so even if you don't like Last Jedi, I think that The Director and the Jedi is worth watching, even for those few moments. Yes, most of it is just about the actual production, which, for someone like me, I also love. I love seeing the approach they took to the practical effects and how, you know, how big of a scale this movie had and everything like that. And it's just nice to see, because I know, again, Rian Johnson aside, I know some people have opinions on like how he's reacted to the fan backlash and things like that. And some people, I know people who really don't like him as a director and are angry at him for making the movie. I know people who really celebrate The Last Jedi. And to me, I mean, he's just a guy who wanted to make a Star Wars film. He seems like a perfectly nice guy from at least what we got to see from all the behind the scenes stuff and everything. Obviously, I don't know him, but that was fascinating to look at and see a guy that's just really excited to be making a Star Wars film and doing his take on a Star Wars film. And here's the thing about those sequel films is the fact that when you really break them down, they didn't have a plot. That, I think everyone can agree, whether you like them or you don't. Everyone who can analyze film and is looking at them can agree that the main problem with the sequel trilogy is the fact that they didn't start off with a plan. They didn't go, this is what's going to happen in the first movie, this is what's going to happen in the second movie, this is what's going to happen in the third movie. Even if it was broad strokes and you could have a director come in and fill in and just hit those beats but make his take on it, as they did kind of in the original trilogy, that would have enhanced the films. Instead, they were more reacting to fan backlash or things like that, and that's the worst way to make a movie, in my opinion. I think make the trilogy you want to make the movies you want to make, and people will come around to it. I think The Last Jedi kind of got this weird situation, this in-between situation, because it's a movie that sets up a lot of stuff, and even plot points that kind of go nowhere could have set up stuff, and I can see why they were put in there and what they could have set up for the third film, for Rise of Skywalker, I guess the 9th film in total, but the third film for this trilogy. And instead, Disney, who's really, I mean, that's the major problem here, is it's a big Disney studio corporate thing, went, no, we gotta react because people aren't liking this, so let's change this and let's do this. And that is the problem that I mainly saw in the Skywalker legacy. Because if you watch that documentary, I was expecting at least something like the director in the Jedi, where there are moments of seeing a director go, am I doing this right? Or some conflict or things like that. Instead, it's really just kind of like, hey, isn't Star Wars great? Which, yeah, it is, but you're dealing with the third film in a trilogy that's also the 9th film and the final film in a Skywalker saga. And it's a film that has really just kind of, split fans down the middle. I think even on Rotten Tomatoes, last time I checked, it had like a 50% rating. It's one of the lowest rated Star Wars films. Because I think fans had the same thing. Fans that hated The Last Jedi felt like, oh, Rise of Skywalker, it fixed things I didn't like. But even people who liked it felt like it was rushed. For somebody like me, and I liked what they did with The Last Jedi, for them to drop a lot of that stuff in Rise of Skywalker and make them very kind of, again, a movie that feels very rushed, that feels like it's a lot of get to point A to get to point B to get to point C, because, oh, we got to find this item, and we got to find this item, and we got to find this item. And granted, I haven't seen the movie since it came out in December, but, I would like to go back and rewatch it, like I said, and see, does it hold up as a trilogy now and as a part of the saga. But a lot of the choices they made, bringing Palpatine back, I was really, really hoping that they would go into more detail about why. Why was that so important? Why did that make sense to them after everything that happened in The Last Jedi? I wanted to see that. Instead, it's very glossed over. And it's kind of like, yeah, it seemed important to bring him back, so we did. And that's no. I mean, no, that doesn't go into detail about things. That's not what I wanted to see. If you can explain your reasoning, I would have loved to see that and been like, oh, maybe I disagree, but I like that they tried something new and they could see why it tied in. And we didn't get a lot of that. We just got a lot of, J.J. Abrams being like, man, isn't it great to make a Star Wars movie? And like, by the way, that's a terrible J.J. Abrams impression. He doesn't sound like that. And I actually do think J.J. Abrams is a good director. I have no problems with him as a director or anything like that. I just think that this movie is very flawed. Reportedly, there are extended cuts of the movie, it's a lot of those reports you see are like an insider said this. So whether there is an extended version of Rise of Skywalker or not, I don't know. But it felt like a movie that really should have been like 3 hours long to give it some breathing room, and it didn't really have that. But this documentary just... There's one moment that to me really, really sums up the problem with Rise of Skywalker and the problem with this documentary and how they approach it. There's a moment, if you remember Rise of Skywalker, there was a moment with this snake where they fall in this hole and there's this snake underground and Rey ends up healing it. They built that snake. They built it as a giant puppet that people were puppeteering so the actors could interact with it and everything like that. And I don't remember who says it, if it was J.J. Abrams or somebody else who was like, yeah, we just ended up replacing it all with CGI. And that to me sums up the rise of Skywalker. And it sums it up by saying, yeah, we had all these things set up for us, but we just decided to do something else with it. And that's ultimately it. The idea of building something, of creating something, of crafting something, just to erase it and replace it with a digital version, when the puppet looks amazing. And wouldn't it have been easier and cheaper ultimately to just erase the puppeteers behind it? Why not do that? Then you've got this giant, beautiful looking actual physical prop that the actors are acting with, and if you want to do little CGI touch-ups to it to make it, come to life or whatever, fine. But just to replace it with a complete CGI character, it's a waste of money, it's a waste of time, and it's very frustrating. And that's what this documentary kind of made me think of. It made me think of this whole concept of Rise of Skywalker as being a film that was kind of the equivalent of pasting CGI over a real beautiful prop. That's kind of what that film ended up being. And the documentary doesn't do anything to enhance it. These reports I saw, these news reports of like, oh, it's essential viewing. It'll make you think differently about the Rise of Skywalker. It really didn't. It made me, obviously, anytime I watch behind the scenes stuff, it makes me appreciate the behind the scenes effort that goes into the movie, and I always appreciate that. I love seeing behind the scenes stuff, even on movies I don't particularly like. It's interesting to see, all the crew and the effort that goes into making a movie. That's stuff that's always fascinated me. And yes, on that, on that scale, I can appreciate it. I can appreciate it that it's a film that was made by people who are setting out to make the best film that they could. I've said it before in Fright Films and other shows I do, nobody sets out to make a bad movie. If you do, you're in the movie business for the wrong reason. Nobody sets out to make a bad movie. Everybody wants to make a good movie. Sometimes things just get out of hand, or things don't work out, or people don't, foresee how audiences are going to perceive it, or all kinds of stuff. But Rise of Skywalker's documentary, The Skywalker Legacy, really does nothing to explain their reasoning, explain why this final film was so important to wrap things up. But I will say this about both documentaries, both The Director and the Jedi and The Skywalker Legacy. Both films give us a glimpse at two directors who just wanted to make good Star Wars movies. People, hated Rian Johnson's approach and thought he ruined Star Wars and all kinds of ridiculous statements like that. But if you watch those behind the scenes, it's a guy who's like, I have a clear vision and I really love Star Wars. I think he even said, and again, I'm paraphrasing or I might be misremembering, but I think people even asked like, well, you saw Rise of Skywalker, what did you think? And he was like, I liked it. I liked it because I like Star Wars. Like, he didn't care because he made his movie and he likes the franchise. And so he thought J.J. Abrams did a fine job with it. And like, J.J. Abrams doesn't say anything about Last Jedi, but like, he directed two of the films in this trilogy, and both Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, for all of its issues, and there are a lot of them, still feel like films made by somebody who likes Star Wars. They like making movies, and they like this universe. And I can appreciate that. Are all these sequel films flawed? Yeah, they are. And these documentaries may or may not change your mind on that. But I think I would have much rather, preferred something like the behind the scenes of the prequels. Something where we get to really see these directors question their ideas or question whether things work. And seeing more of that would be nice, instead of seeing kind of the Disney polished version we got to see, which is like, everybody's having a great time making Star Wars. Because obviously, if you read the news or see the stars of the films talk about it, they also have opinions on it and kind of feel like things were flawed and things didn't work. And like, that's the interesting stuff. I'm not saying to make a documentary that's all, doom and gloom. That's just a documentary. People are like, well, this isn't going to work out. This is going to suck. I don't want to see that documentary. But I do want to see a documentary that is much more of the mindset of, hey, we've got this billion-dollar, trillion-dollar, whatever franchise in our hands. We want to make the best movie we can, but we have to make sure our reasoning and our points are clear as to why we chose this thing. It's like they taught you in school. Show your work. Show your work. Why? Okay, you got to this answer. Why did you get to this answer? If your answer is, I don't know, well, then you didn't do your work properly. And that's how I feel about these documentaries, is that they're fascinating and they are interesting, but I really wanted them to show their work. You know, go in and talk about, this is our process, this is why we did this is why we chose that. And you get some of that in The Director and the Jedi, which I really appreciate, but Skywalker Legacy was much more just kind of like a behind-the-scenes documentary. And while entertaining, didn't ultimately change my mind on the film. Maybe that'll happen on a rewatch at some point. But what did you think? Did you watch these documentaries? Did they change your mind? Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe somebody saw it and went, yeah, I totally now appreciate The Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. But let me know in the comments down below. Also, on top of that, if you want to see more stuff like this, you can watch more of my impromptu reviews. You can watch more of my Fright Films episodes, which are kind of my analytical take on horror movies specifically. And you can also take a look at some of the other videos I've got on the channel, all kinds of food reviews, all kinds of stuff. So take a look at that. If you like this and you want to see more, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.